Hi, welcome back to By Sword and Musket, and we're going to have a look at another of the old staples of rifle collecting, and that is the British short magazine Lee-Enfield rifle. It's a 10-shot 303 bolt-action weapon, fully collectible in this country, the UK, on a firearms license for target shooting and classic rifle competitions. This is the rifle that Britain went to war with for World War One and eventually defeated the Germans and the Imperial German Army with. It's a substantial purpose-built weapon that's good for Tom, Dick and Harry. Built and designed to fit everybody, but also quite rugged and very successful. Many millions of them were made over their lifetime. In fact, they only just stopped making them in the 1980s in India and other parts of the world. But the example that we're going to have a look at today has been through many different configurations. These rifles, when improved, adopted new markings, etc. And being as how this one was originally built by BSA, Birmingham Small Arms Company, in 1913, it's been through a few changes. And it's moved around the world. But the difficulty in looking at military rifles is working out all the different markings and what they mean, and then perhaps even what order they arrived on the rifle. Because this action that includes this wrist strap, this action has survived through several different changes, and it's only by looking at the very small markings that are stamped into the gun at various points of its life that we can see where and how it was done. But for the life of me, I haven't studied enough yet to find out the order that it was done in. I can guess, but working out the particular order that this rifle or the configurations it went through or the dates that those happened, that requires even deeper and in-depth study. But the thing is, I actually purchased this rifle as a shooter. When I bought it, I was not into serious collecting. So I bought it long distance, virtually over the phone, under a dealer's assurance that it was a good shooter. And in fact, it has turned out to be a very good shooter. I love the patina, the wear over the different components, the colour in the timber, the richness to the timber, and the pattern of wear, which all feels genuine to me. So what I'm going to have to do is to take hold of the camera and go in close up to show you some of the marks that have appeared on the rifle. Some of them are a bit more obvious than others. For instance, at some stage, someone on guard duty got very bored and started trying to scratch his initials into the stock. I believe that this is a T. From where and from who, no idea. As I say, if you're collecting and you want some worth in the weapons that you purchase, then there are some basic rules that you want to try and stick to when you make your selection. Now, obviously, as I said before, this wasn't entirely selected for collecting, but it had its good points. One of the main things that you want to look for on an Enfield, whichever mark or breed or model it is, are the numbers, the serial numbers. You want a matching serial number. So we have a number here on the receiver ring, which is very difficult to read. In fact, the other day, it was convincing me that it was changing before my eyes because I haven't got my glasses on and I haven't got the right light. We want this number to match the bolt. And in fact, it does, which is a relief. So, matching bolt, then with the SMLE, they numbered the nose caps on the bayonet stud. And that was because bedding of the muzzle end of the rifle and the securing of the woodwork was that important that you couldn't go mixing these things up. So that part had to be numbered. That includes the bayonet mounting lug, and the number is actually on the stud. I'll try and get in closer to that. The rifle was built in 1913 by BSA. I have a feeling that it probably served World War I in the Western theatre, and then I believe that it went east at some stage and ended up in the hands of the Indian Army and the Indian armories because of the marks that are to be found if you look very, very closely. Finally, at the end of its life, a South African barrel has been fitted, and I'll show you the markings there as well. So you bear with me for a second. I will check and adjust the camera so you can see these markings that tell the story of the rifle up close. But if you think about it, 1913, that's 111 years old. This thing is 111 years old, and I can shoot very well with it. The action's smooth, it always feeds, it doesn't misfeed, it doesn't muck about. It's still got the magazine cut off, which is a thing that, in fact, the Indian Army retained. It has windage on the sights. There is a wheel at the back here for adjustment. It has a round cocking piece, which is an early feature of the SMLE type rifles, and it goes back into long lees and magazine loaders and charger loading. It has a plain stock disc, which I take to be a reassuring sign because they're easily faked. Now, if this came out of service with the main British Army and then moved east, the unit designation would have been removed. And in fact, there is a very good, very smooth repair to the timber here, where this disc has been levered out and it's broken the timber away. But instead of just gluing it back in or smudging it in, I've actually cut away the damage with a chisel and squared in a new piece of walnut, and now that's absolutely flush and perfect. It has the brass butt plate with the trap, which contained a cleaning bottle, usually a brass cleaning bottle from this era, and a pull through, maybe some rag. This one's empty at the moment because I've jawed it for other things. This is a later sling. It in fact belongs to my number 4T, but I like to use it with this rifle. even though it's a 1913, it now has flat or flush machined sight protectors. Now, I believe that that may have happened in India, or possibly with the fixing of the South African barrel. It has the pinched foresight protector wings that are pulled in here. That's still early. There is no, or there are no, and there are no provisions for long-range volley sights. There is no cutout here for the optical part, the aperture that you look through for the long-range volley sights. And you might well wonder, well, that's a 1913 rifle. It should have those markings, that provision. But if you look very carefully, and I'll get closer with the camera again in a second, DP, drill purpose, the woodwork of this rifle came off a different weapon. And the Indians, being Indians, very, very good at keeping weapons in the field, have crossed out the original serial number with a single X on each number and applied the matching serial number to the stock for this, even though underneath it still says DP as in drill purpose. And that proves that, you know, a lot of, although there's no DP on the action, it proves that these rifles can live again quite happily, because this one's pass proof and is now, keeps me happy on the range. Many a happier shoot. So let's get up close and let's look at these marks, which apparently tell the story of the rifle. But as I say, I've got a whole sheet of paper here where I've been picking the marks up, researching them, and in my head I can't quite get the order of its life, because it's impossible to tell what order the marks were put on in. So there we go, up close and personal. We have at the top GR, George Rex, for George V, who was on the throne from 1910 to 1936. Below that we have BSA & Co. and 1913. Below that, Short Lee, 1 double star, followed by IP. The IP is a later Indian marking. The 2 stars indicate some of the changes that may have gone on. Now, as far as I've researched, if this rifle was in sea service, it could have been transferred to land surface, and that would have been enough to pick up one of those asterisks. There was also a change to the rear sight, where they used a U or notch, U-notch aiming point, or it could be that the rifle was altered to take the Mark 7 303 cartridge. That's what those marks mean. The RPI mark, that is another Indian mark. Applied to the butt there. What I like about this weapon is it shows genuine wear. So above that line, there's some bluing on the magazine, and below it's obviously and evidently worn off. So There's the sights. Another reason for the inheritance of another asterisk, where they changed out the rear notch, where they changed out the V and put in the notch. So that one's now got windage. Obviously it's got elevation, fine elevation by this knurled wheel up to 2,000 yards. The split or hinged barrel band, an early feature, and as we talked about before, numbered stud for the bayonet fixing. Look at the detail in the way it's worn. You've got bluing on the inside where it's shielded, then out here you've got everything from brown down to silver. So turn the rifle over now. Looking at what I would call left hand side, you can clearly see RFI mark, but interestingly underneath it actually says 1929. Nice clear early Enfield inspection mark on the side of the serrated trigger. Quite unusually, it hasn't picked up the usual screw running crossways through the stock, which is often seen on the Indian rifles. Now, if we turn it upside down, just look behind the trigger guard. Quite clear markings with a D for sort of second line or brought back for lesser duties type weapon. Now there's the DP I was talking about, drill purpose. They were not meant to be fired. They were fully functional, but they were not meant to be fired. Broad arrow. Moving forwards, let's have a look at these crossed out numbers I mentioned earlier. Oops. Start. So there we have the original rifle number, which has been studiously crossed out, and then the matching number has been applied. Once again, there's another D below it. So this stock, this lower woodwork, was on a different rifle. I would say it's been done in the armory because they've gone to the length of crossing out all the previous information and they've applied the new information. So as you can see, there's an awful lot of information right under your nose. Oh, one of the other things, I'll have to once again put you down and pick you up again. So, rear section of the handguard, very carefully removed because these are very prone to cracking. You have to be extremely careful. In fact, there is a crack on the inside. It's been armory repaired with that cross slither of wood. Yeah, so we look at the underneath of the sight and we see that yes, it comes from a completely different rifle. M45804. That's been changed out. It's possible, looking at the paint that's on it, that it was easier just to keep the whole sight on the weapon. Anyway, this is now the third country of influence. Those marks are South African marks. This is a South African barrel, and that is a South African proof at the top. U cross flags P. If we turn it this way, we can see when it was proofed for the UK. We can see that it's up to date with modern civilian proofs. Now, this is quite interesting up close. The original marks are worn away. You can see the remains of a crown. But then this mark has been applied, and that is an Indian mark. GRI. George Regina, and then not Regina, George Rex, and then some Indian word, not Indian, Latin word, which means imperturacious or something. Don't know Latin, never did it. Imperial, overruling, etc. So I think that's when the Indians first got their hands on it, because that mark was used from 1905 onwards until later India independence. And rifle's just too early to have independence markings on it, unless it had another lot of work done. P purely doesn't mean proof, it means it's a replacement part. And there's something else there which I cannot properly examine, but it is reminiscent of other South African marks. So this old girl's been around the world a few times, around the block, and it's still a very good shooter. So don't turn your nose up if someone actually says to you, it's a bit of a bitzer. A bit of a bitzer might eventually turn out to be more interesting than a very bog standard untravelled rifle. So that was the SMLE. Number 3, Mark 1, 2 asterisks. So Mark 1, 2 star, and then IP with Aishapur Arsenal working marks on it. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed that and you want to come back, just look up Sword and Musket. We'll still be here. Click like or subscribe, and you'll receive all the videos as they come out. Thanks again for joining. Have a good day.